Admiral Kextera stood before the holographic display showing the small blue world that had become the subject of heated debate across the Galactic Empire. The planet designated as Terra 3 appeared unremarkable from space, swirling white clouds over blue oceans and brown-green landmasses. Yet intelligence reports suggested this world harbored the most dangerous species the Empire had encountered in 3 millennia of expansion. The humans call it Earth, Intelligence Officer Vexlon reported, his scaled hands dancing over the control interface. Our deep space reconnaissance has monitored their electromagnetic emissions for the past 50 rotations. They broadcast their wars, their entertainment, their scientific discoveries across the void with reckless abandon. Kextera's 4 eyes studied the tactical readout with growing interest. The humans possessed crude nuclear weapons, primitive chemical rockets, and computational systems that barely qualified as artificial intelligence by Imperial standards. Their largest vessels struggled to escape their own gravity well, while Imperial dreadnoughts could cross star systems in mere cycles. "This seems like another backwater conquest," Admiral Kextera muttered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had personally overseen the subjugation of 47 worlds. "Why does the War Council treat this as a special case?" Vexlon activated another display, showing intercepted human transmissions, movies, television programs, literature, and historical records. "The humans document everything, Admiral. Their entertainment reveals their true nature. They glorify warfare, celebrate destruction, and create fictional scenarios where they defeat superior alien civilizations." A series of human films played across the screens. Independence Day, District 9, Ender's Game, The Martian, Interstellar. Each showed humans either fighting alien invaders or conquering impossible odds through determination, ingenuity, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. "Look at their historical records," Vexlon continued. "They have engaged in continuous warfare for their entire recorded history. They split atoms not for energy, but for weapons. They turned every scientific discovery into a tool of destruction. They poisoned their own atmosphere while simultaneously developing technologies to survive in vacuum." Admiral Kextera watched footage of human soldiers in combat, their primitive weapons spitting fire and death. She observed their cities, massive concrete and steel constructions that housed millions of beings in vertical towers reaching toward the sky. The humans had built civilizations in frozen wastelands, burning deserts, and on floating platforms above their oceans. "The War Council believes this world represents a trap," Vexlon explained. "Not a technological trap, but a psychological one. Every species we have conquered submitted when faced with our overwhelming superiority. The humans broadcast scenarios where they defeat superior technology through creativity, sacrifice, and refusal to accept defeat." The Admiral studied reports from previous conquests. The Zephyrians had surrendered after a demonstration of Imperial firepower. The Crystalline Confederacy had negotiated terms within hours of first contact. The Gas Giant Collective had actually requested Imperial protection after seeing their fleet capabilities. "Humans are different," Vexlon emphasized. "They celebrate individuals who fight impossible odds. Their literature is filled with stories of David defeating Goliath, of small forces overcoming vast armies through clever tactics. They teach their young that victory belongs to those who refuse to quit." Admiral Kextera accessed tactical projections showing potential invasion scenarios. Imperial doctrine called for overwhelming force, 1,000 ships arriving simultaneously to demonstrate absolute superiority before demanding surrender. The strategy had proven effective across dozens of worlds. "Perhaps the War Council overestimates these primitives," she suggested. "Their electromagnetic emissions show internal conflicts, environmental destruction, and social inequality. Surely a species that cannot manage their own planet poses little threat to the Empire." Vexlon highlighted specific human achievements that contradicted this assessment. They sent expeditions to their moon using chemical rockets. They built machines that think. They created weapons capable of destroying their entire biosphere. They accomplished all this while fighting each other constantly. The intelligence officer brought up biological data collected from long-range scans. Human physiology reveals adaptation to extreme environments. They maintain consciousness in gravitational fields that would crush most species. Their immune systems combat pathogens that would devastate entire Imperial colonies. They reproduce and survive in temperature ranges spanning hundreds of degrees. Admiral Kexthara examined detailed scans of human anatomy. Dense bone structure, redundant organ systems, rapid healing capabilities, and neural networks optimized for pattern recognition and creative problem solving. Evolution had forged them in a crucible of constant environmental challenge. Their planet is a death world by galactic standards, Vexilon noted. Extreme weather, geological instability, aggressive predators, and microscopic organisms that kill without warning. Humans evolved not just to survive this environment, but to dominate it completely. The Admiral watched surveillance footage of humans engaging in recreational activities that would qualify as military training on most worlds. They leaped from aircraft for pleasure, descended into crushing ocean depths, climbed vertical rock faces, and raced vehicles at speeds that defied survival instincts. The War Council's concern centers on psychological warfare, Vexilon explained. Our standard conquest protocols rely on demonstrating overwhelming superiority to encourage surrender. Humans appear to interpret overwhelming odds as motivation rather than deterrent. Admiral Kexthara studied the final intelligence summary. Human society celebrated individuals who faced impossible challenges, scientists who revolutionized understanding despite ridicule, leaders who died defending principles, explorers who ventured into unknown dangers for knowledge itself. She closed the display and faced her subordinate. Schedule a meeting with Fleet Command. If the War Council believes Earth represents a trap, we must determine whether the Empire is prepared to spring it. The flagship's engines hummed with power as Admiral Kexthara prepared to recommend the largest invasion force in Imperial history. Earth awaited, seemingly helpless, but intelligence suggested appearances could prove fatally deceptive. Fleet Admiral Zorkon had commanded more successful conquests than any military leader in Imperial history. Standing in the command chamber of the massive flagship Eternal Dominance, he reviewed the assembled invasion force with satisfaction. 2,000 vessels stretched across space, enough firepower to crack continental plates and boil oceans. The largest fleet ever assembled for a single world conquest, declared General Mordex, his cybernetic implants glowing with tactical data streams. These humans will witness the might of the Empire and surrender within hours. Admiral Zorkon studied the holographic projection of Earth's solar system. Human space activities appeared laughably primitive. Small metal capsules orbiting their planet, a few robotic explorers scattered across nearby worlds, and communication satellites that barely qualified as technology by Imperial standards. Intelligence reports suggest human defensive capabilities remain limited to surface-based weapons, General Mordex continued. They possess no orbital defense platforms, no fleet vessels capable of interplanetary combat, and no energy shield protecting their major population centers. The Fleet Admiral activated real-time surveillance feeds showing human military installations. Primitive aircraft carriers floating on water surfaces, ground-based missile systems, and soldiers carrying chemical propellant weapons that fired small metal projectiles. Their most advanced fighters moved slower than Imperial transport shuttles. Begin the invasion according to standard protocols, Admiral Zorkon commanded. Demonstrate overwhelming superiority, broadcast surrender demands, and await their inevitable capitulation. The Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, their massive vessels eclipsing entire moons. Dreadnoughts the size of cities led formations of cruisers and destroyers, each ship capable of devastating planetary surfaces. The technological disparity seemed so absolute that victory appeared predetermined. Human responses proved immediate and chaotic. Their primitive communication networks exploded with panic transmissions as astronomical observers detected the alien fleet. News broadcasts showed crowds gathering in streets, religious leaders calling for prayer, and political leaders convening emergency sessions. They appear appropriately terrified, General Mordex observed with satisfaction. Notice how their electromagnetic emissions spike with fear responses. Admiral Zorkon monitored human military reactions with growing confidence. Fighter aircraft launched from bases worldwide. Naval vessels moved toward defensive positions, and ground forces mobilized according to clearly obsolete tactical doctrines. Nothing suggested capability to resist Imperial technology. The first surprise came when human space agencies redirected every available satellite to track fleet movements with unexpected precision. Their computational networks, though primitive, began calculating Imperial trajectories, weapon ranges, and potential tactical options with remarkable speed. Interesting, Admiral Zorkon murmured. They attempt tactical analysis despite obvious technological inferiority. Human communication intercepted by Imperial intelligence revealed something unexpected. Rather than panic about inevitable defeat, human military leaders discussed potential resistance strategies. They referenced historical examples of asymmetric warfare, analyzed Imperial ship designs for potential weaknesses, and began coordinating global defense efforts. Admiral, Communication Officer Veltar reported with confusion. Human broadcasts are not requesting mercy or attempting negotiation. They appear to be preparing for prolonged resistance. Admiral Zorkon accessed specific human communications. Military commanders discussed guerrilla warfare tactics. Scientists analyzed captured alien materials from meteorite impacts, and engineers proposed modifications to existing weapon systems. Most remarkably, civilian populations began organizing evacuation procedures that suggested preparation for extended conflict. Perhaps they failed to comprehend our technological superiority, General Mordek suggested. Shall we provide a demonstration? The Imperial fleet moved deeper into the solar system, their weapons charging with energy signatures visible across the electromagnetic spectrum. Human observations detected these preparations, yet resistance activities only intensified. Manufacturing facilities began producing ammunition and equipment at accelerated rates. Admiral Zorkon watched with growing puzzlement as human responses defied all precedent. Previous conquests had followed predictable patterns: initial shock, desperate attempts at communication, and eventual surrender when technological disparity became obvious. Humans instead appeared to interpret the invasion as a challenge requiring innovative solutions. Human scientists began reverse engineering Imperial technology based solely on sensor readings. Their primitive computers modeled Imperial weapon systems, analyzing energy signatures to determine potential countermeasures. Most impressively, they accomplished this analysis while simultaneously preparing their planet for total war. Admiral, Intelligence Officer Kexra reported with obvious bewilderment. Human authorities are not attempting surrender negotiations. They appear to be implementing something they call scorched earth preparations. Admiral Zorkon examined the intelligence summary with growing concern. Humans were preparing to deny resources to potential occupying forces. Critical infrastructure received explosive charges. Food supplies were being dispersed to hidden locations, and civilian populations were evacuating to defensible positions in mountainous terrain. They planned to make conquest costly, General Mordex realized. Unusual strategy for a species facing overwhelming technological superiority. The fleet admiral studied human historical records provided by intelligence services. Every human civilization had faced invasion by superior forces at some point in their development. Vikings had raided coastal settlements, Mongols had conquered vast empires, and colonial powers had subjugated entire continents. Yet humans had consistently developed methods to resist, adapt, and eventually overcome their conquerors. Sir, Navigation Officer Trendal announced, human space installations are moving. Admiral Zorkon observed with surprise as human satellites adjusted their orbits. Space stations changed positions, and even their primitive lunar bases began relocating equipment. The movements appeared coordinated despite the lack of faster-than-light communication between installations. Human space activities revealed sophisticated planning despite technological limitations. They positioned observation posts to maintain surveillance of Imperial fleet movements, established redundant communication networks to coordinate resistance efforts, and began constructing improvised weapons platforms using materials from asteroid mining operations. These primitives demonstrate unexpected tactical sophistication, General Mordex admitted reluctantly. They coordinate global defense efforts more efficiently than many advanced civilizations we have conquered. Admiral Zorkon accessed psychological profiles developed by Imperial xenobiologists. Humans exhibited unusual behavior patterns when facing superior opponents. Rather than submission, they displayed increased aggression, creativity, and willingness to sacrifice individual safety for collective survival. Prepare the fleet for orbital insertion, Admiral Zorkon commanded. Humans require a demonstration of absolute power before they acknowledge reality. As the Imperial Armada moved toward Earth, human activities reached frantic intensity. Every available resource was redirected toward resistance preparations, while their global communication network shared tactical information, strategic plans, and technological innovations at unprecedented speed. Admiral Zorkon began to understand why the War Council had expressed concerns about Earth. Humans were not responding like any previously conquered species. They appeared to view the invasion as an opportunity to prove their capabilities rather than a disaster requiring surrender. The first Imperial assault began at dawn over the Pacific Ocean. Massive dreadnoughts descended through Earth's atmosphere, their energy shields deflecting everything humans could fire at them. Primitive missiles exploded harmlessly against Imperial defenses, while fighter jets fell like insects before directed energy weapons. Admiral Zorkon watched the one-sided battle with satisfaction. Human resistance was fierce, but futile, their weapons proving incapable of penetrating even the lightest Imperial armor. Within hours, major human cities would surrender, and planetary conquest would follow standard protocols. Then, something unprecedented happened. Admiral, Tactical Officer Hindar announced with confusion, human forces are withdrawing from all engagement zones simultaneously. The withdrawal wasn't retreat, it was strategic repositioning. Human military units disappeared into urban environments, mountainous terrain, and underground installations with coordinated precision. Rather than defending fixed positions against superior firepower, they simply vanished. Cowardice, General Mordex declared confidently. They abandoned hopeless defensive positions and will surrender shortly. Admiral Zorkon studied the tactical display with growing unease. Human forces hadn't fled randomly. They had executed complex redeployment operations under fire, moving personnel and equipment to predetermined positions. The coordination required suggested extensive planning and discipline unusual for a supposedly primitive species. Imperial forces landed in major human cities to find them largely abandoned. New York, London, Tokyo, and Moscow contained only small populations of civilians who claimed ignorance of military activities. The massive urban centers that should have housed millions appeared to have been evacuated systematically. Where did they go? General Mordex demanded as his troops secured empty government buildings and abandoned military bases. The answer came through asymmetric warfare that no Imperial commander had ever experienced. Human forces began attacking supply lines, communication relays, and isolated Imperial units using tactics that defied conventional military logic. Small teams of humans carrying primitive weapons infiltrated Imperial positions using underground tunnels, sewer systems, and maintenance shafts. They planted explosive devices in critical systems, sabotaged equipment, and disappeared before Imperial forces could respond. These attacks are militarily insignificant, General Mordex insisted after reviewing casualty reports. Small harassing forces cannot threaten our operational capabilities. Admiral Zorkon wasn't convinced. Human attacks targeted specific vulnerabilities with precision that suggested detailed knowledge of Imperial equipment. They disrupted communication networks, damaged power systems, and destroyed supplies with surgical accuracy. More concerning was the psychological impact. Imperial troops, accustomed to fighting conventional battles against organized armies, found themselves unable to identify enemy positions. Humans appeared from unexpected directions, struck specific targets, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Sir, Intelligence Officer Kexvara reported with obvious distress. Human forces are sharing tactical information across their global communication network. Every successful attack against our forces is being analyzed and replicated worldwide. Admiral Zorkon accessed intercepted human communications and discovered something unprecedented. Humans were treating the invasion as a learning opportunity. They studied Imperial weapons, analyzed tactical patterns, and shared countermeasures through encrypted networks that proved surprisingly difficult to disrupt. Human scientists had reverse-engineered Imperial technology captured during initial engagements. Using primitive manufacturing techniques, they began producing improvised weapons designed specifically to exploit Imperial vulnerabilities. Their adaptive capabilities exceeded anything in Imperial experience. Admiral, Engineering Chief Plexron announced urgently, "Human attacks have damaged our primary communication array." They targeted specific components that would maximize system disruption while avoiding automated defenses. The damage required detailed knowledge of Imperial engineering principles that humans shouldn't possess. Yet examination of the sabotage revealed sophisticated understanding of critical system interdependencies. Admiral Zorkon realized that humans had been studying Imperial technology since the fleet's arrival. Their primitive computers had analyzed energy signatures, weapon discharge patterns, and ship configurations to identify exploitable weaknesses. "They're learning faster than we can adapt," General Mordex admitted reluctantly. "Each engagement provides them additional intelligence about our capabilities and limitations." Human resistance evolved continuously. Initial attacks had been crude and largely ineffective, but subsequent operations demonstrated increasing sophistication. They began using improvised electronic warfare devices to disrupt Imperial sensors, deployed chemical weapons specifically designed to corrode Imperial materials, and coordinated simultaneous strikes across multiple continents. "Sir," Communication Officer Veltar reported with genuine concern, "human forces have established redundant command structures that we cannot locate or eliminate. Each time we identify leadership positions, they relocate using underground networks we didn't know existed." Admiral Zorkon studied intelligence reports revealing the extent of human preparations. Every major city contained extensive underground facilities, subway systems, utility tunnels, underground parking structures, and basement complexes that connected across vast distances. Humans had essentially created a secondary civilization beneath their surface cities. These underground networks contained manufacturing facilities, communication centers, supply depots, and living spaces capable of supporting large populations indefinitely. They built this infrastructure over centuries, Intelligence Officer Kexvara explained. Not for military purposes, but for transportation, utilities, and commerce. They're now adapting civilian infrastructure for warfare applications. The revelation forced Admiral Zorkon to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human capabilities. Their society had unknowingly prepared for exactly this type of conflict through normal urban development. Human tactics grew increasingly effective as they learned Imperial patterns. They began predicting patrol routes, anticipating supply movements, and timing attacks to maximize damage while minimizing their own casualties. Most disturbing was their willingness to sacrifice resources and personnel to achieve strategic objectives. Admiral, Medical Officer Zurvex reported with obvious confusion. Human prisoners refuse to provide intelligence about resistance operations. They appear to prefer death over cooperation. Imperial interrogation techniques, effective on dozens of species, proved useless against humans. They demonstrated psychological resilience that bordered on incomprehensible, maintaining operational security despite torture, mind manipulation, and chemical persuasion. Their cultural conditioning emphasizes individual sacrifice for collective survival, Intelligence Officer Kexvara explained. They celebrate martyrdom and consider cooperation with occupying forces as ultimate dishonor. Admiral Zorkon studied human historical records with growing alarm. Every successful invasion of human territory had eventually failed. Occupying forces might achieve temporary control, but human resistance always adapted, evolved, and ultimately prevailed through attrition warfare. "Sir," Navigation Officer Trendal announced with unprecedented urgency, "human space installations are actively attacking our outer fleet elements." Admiral Zorkon observed with astonishment as improvised human weapons struck Imperial vessels with devastating precision. Using redirected asteroids, nuclear warheads mounted on chemical rockets, and even their primitive space stations converted into kinetic weapons, humans had created an orbital defense network from civilian infrastructure. The trap was closing. 3 months into the occupation, Admiral Zorkon faced a situation no Imperial commander had ever encountered. His massive fleet, designed to conquer civilizations across the galaxy, was being systematically destroyed by beings wielding primitive technology and unconventional tactics. Casualty reports, General, Admiral Zorkon demanded, though he dreaded the answer. General Mordex's cybernetic implants flickered with exhaustion as he accessed the latest data. 1,700 Imperial personnel killed or missing this week alone. We've lost 43 vessels to improvised human weapons. Supply lines are compromised on every continent. The numbers represented an unprecedented military disaster. Imperial forces have been reduced by 30%, while humans appear to grow stronger with each passing day. Their resistance network had evolved into a sophisticated military organization that outperformed many advanced civilizations. How is this possible? Admiral Zorkon demanded. We possess technology centuries beyond their capabilities. The answer lay in humanity's fundamental approach to warfare. Rather than attempting to match Imperial firepower directly, humans had weaponized everything in their environment. Civilian infrastructure became military assets, industrial facilities produced improvised weapons, and even their entertainment industry contributed to the war effort. Human filmmakers had documented Imperial tactics and distributed the footage globally, allowing resistance cells to study alien combat patterns. Scientists analyzed captured Imperial materials and shared their discoveries through academic networks. Engineers reverse-engineered alien technology using techniques developed for civilian manufacturing. They've turned their entire civilization into a weapon, General Mordex observed with grudging admiration. Every human contributes to the resistance effort regardless of their official role. Imperial forces found themselves fighting an enemy that existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Humans disguised as civilians provided intelligence, sabotaged equipment, and guided resistance operations. Children carried messages through areas too dangerous for adults. Elderly humans operated communication networks from hidden locations. Sir, Intelligence Officer Kexra reported with obvious stress, human forces have captured Admiral Vexthan's command ship using modified civilian aircraft. Admiral Zorkon studied the tactical recording with disbelief. Humans had converted commercial airliners into massive kinetic weapons, loading them with explosives and crashing them into Imperial vessels with devastating effect. The primitive tactic had penetrated advanced defensive systems through sheer audacity. More disturbing was what happened to captured Imperial technology. Humans didn't simply study alien equipment, they improved it. Using techniques developed for civilian innovation, they identified design flaws, corrected engineering inefficiencies, and enhanced performance beyond original specifications. They're building better versions of our own weapons, Engineering Chief Plexron announced with obvious bewilderment. Human-modified Imperial technology outperforms original designs in multiple categories. Admiral Zorkon examined a captured human weapon that incorporated Imperial energy technology into a primitive projectile system. The hybrid design delivered more damage per energy unit than standard Imperial weapons while using materials humans could manufacture easily. Human innovation accelerated under pressure. Faced with technologically superior opponents, they developed solutions that Imperial engineers had never considered. Necessity drove creativity that produced breakthrough technologies at unprecedented speed. Admiral, Communication Officer Veltar, announced urgently, human forces have established contact with the Zephyrian resistance movement. They're sharing tactical information with our former enemies. The strategic implications were catastrophic. Humans weren't content to defend their own world. They were actively destabilizing Imperial control across the galaxy. Their resistance techniques spread to previously conquered civilizations, inspiring rebellion throughout Imperial space. Admiral Zorkon accessed intelligence reports from other Imperial territories. Zephyrian forces had adopted human guerrilla tactics. The Crystalline Confederacy was using human-developed communication encryption. Even the Gas Giant Collective was implementing asymmetric warfare strategies learned from Earth's resistance. They're teaching other species how to fight us, General Mordex realized with growing alarm. Human resistance has become a galactic phenomenon. The Empire's greatest strength, technological superiority, had become irrelevant against an enemy that refused to fight conventional battles. Humans simply ignored Imperial advantages while exploiting weaknesses that previous enemies had never recognized. Human psychological warfare proved particularly effective against Imperial forces. They broadcast captured footage of Imperial defeats, shared testimonials from defecting alien soldiers, and demonstrated that the supposedly invincible Empire could be beaten by determination and clever tactics. Morale among Imperial troops has collapsed, Medical Officer Zurvex reported. Many units refuse to engage human forces directly. They've developed genuine fear of human capabilities. Admiral Zorkon understood the psychological dynamics. Imperial military doctrine assumed technological superiority would guarantee victory. When that assumption proved false, Imperial forces lost confidence in their fundamental worldview. Humans had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had made the Imperial military afraid. Elite units that had conquered dozens of worlds now hesitated to engage primitive humans wielding improvised weapons. "Sir," Navigation Officer Trendal announced with barely concealed panic, "human space forces have launched coordinated strikes against our home fleet. They're using our own captured vessels." Admiral Zorkon observed the impossible sight of human pilots flying captured Imperial fighters with devastating effectiveness. They had learned to operate advanced alien technology in mere months while developing tactics that exploited design assumptions Imperial engineers had considered fundamental. Human space operations revealed their true genius for warfare. They had converted asteroid mining equipment into kinetic weapons, transformed communication satellites into electronic warfare platforms, and turned their primitive space stations into heavily armed fortresses. They're not just defending their world, Admiral Zorkon realized with growing dread. They're preparing to invade Imperial space. Human military planning had expanded beyond planetary defense to include offensive operations against Imperial territories. They were building fleets using captured technology, training pilots on stolen vessels, and developing strategies for conquering alien worlds. The final blow came when Imperial High Command received a transmission from Earth. A human female appeared on screen, wearing improvised armor incorporating Imperial technology. Behind her stood representatives from multiple species, Zephyrians, crystalline beings, and even gas giant entities. "I am General Sarah Chun of the Human Resistance Coalition," she announced with calm authority. "We demand complete Imperial withdrawal from all occupied territories within 30 standard cycles. Failure to comply will result in direct military action against Imperial core worlds." Admiral Zorkon stared at the transmission with stunned disbelief. Humans weren't just resisting Imperial occupation. They were declaring war on the entire Empire. A primitive species that had never left their solar system was threatening the most powerful civilization in galactic history. "Admiral," General Mordex said quietly, "I recommend immediate withdrawal to regroup and develop new tactical approaches." The admission of defeat tasted bitter, but Admiral Zorkon recognized reality. The Empire had walked into Earth expecting easy conquest, and instead triggered a galactic revolution led by the most dangerous species they had ever encountered. The trap had been sprung, and the Empire was caught. 6 months after the failed invasion of Earth, Admiral Zorkon stood before the Imperial War Council in chains. The once mighty fleet that had departed to conquer a primitive world had limped home with less than half its original strength, pursued by human-led coalition forces that now threatened Imperial core worlds. "Explain this catastrophe," demanded Supreme Chancellor Morketh, his ancient voice resonating with fury. "How did the Empire's greatest fleet suffer defeat at the hands of primitives who barely mastered spaceflight?" Admiral Zorkon faced the assembled leaders of galactic civilization with the weight of unprecedented failure on his shoulders. Around him stood the most powerful beings in known space, creatures who had commanded stellar empires for millennia, witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and never experienced military defeat. "The humans were not what our intelligence suggested," Admiral Zorkon began carefully. "They possess capabilities that our analysis failed to detect." "Capabilities?" Chancellor Morketh's 4 eyes blazed with incredulous rage. They fight with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Their fastest ships move slower than our cargo vessels. Admiral Zorkon activated a holographic display showing human resistance operations. The images revealed innovations that had revolutionized warfare across the galaxy. Improvised weapons that outperformed Imperial technology, tactics that neutralized overwhelming firepower, and strategies that turned Imperial strengths into crippling weaknesses. They adapt faster than any species we've encountered, Admiral Zorkon explained. Every engagement teaches them new capabilities while revealing our limitations. Within weeks, they were fielding weapons designed specifically to counter our technology. The War Council studied footage of human forces in action. Small teams carrying improvised equipment had infiltrated heavily defended Imperial positions, sabotaged critical systems, and escaped before reinforcements could respond. Their coordination and precision exceeded that of elite Imperial special forces. More concerning is their influence on other species, Admiral Zorkon continued. Humans have inspired rebellion throughout Imperial space. Former subjects are adopting human tactics and achieving unprecedented success against our occupation forces. Intelligence reports confirmed the scope of the crisis. The Zephyrian resistance had liberated 3 star systems using human guerrilla warfare techniques. The Crystalline Confederacy had declared independence and successfully defended their territory against Imperial forces. Even the docile gas giant collective was demanding autonomy. Humans have weaponized hope, Admiral Zorkon realized aloud. They demonstrated that the Empire can be defeated, and that knowledge is spreading faster than we can contain it. Supreme Chancellor Morketh studied the tactical analyses with growing alarm. Imperial military doctrine assumed that technological superiority guaranteed victory against any opponent. Humans had proven this assumption catastrophically wrong. What do they want? Chancellor Morketh demanded. Admiral Zorkon accessed the most recent communication from the human-led coalition. General Sarah Chin's demands had evolved beyond Imperial withdrawal from Earth to include complete transformation of galactic civilization. Total Imperial withdrawal from all occupied territories, Admiral Zorkon reported. Reparations to conquered species, dismantling of the Imperial fleet, and establishment of what they call a Galactic Democratic Federation, with humans as founding members. The demands were unprecedented in scope and audacity. Humans weren't simply seeking freedom from Imperial rule. They intended to replace the Empire entirely with a new form of galactic governance, based on cooperation rather than conquest. Impossible, Chancellor Morketh declared. The Empire has ruled for 3 millennia. We will not surrender to primitives. Admiral Zorkon highlighted intelligence reports showing human military preparations. They had converted captured Imperial technology into weapons of unprecedented power. Human engineers had reverse-engineered Imperial faster-than-light drives, improved energy weapon efficiency, and developed defensive systems superior to original designs. They're building a fleet capable of challenging Imperial supremacy, Admiral Zorkon warned. Human innovation combined with captured Imperial technology creates capabilities we cannot counter with conventional tactics. More disturbing were reports of human space exploration. Rather than limiting themselves to defensive operations, humans had launched expeditions beyond their solar system. They were establishing colonies, recruiting alien allies, and building a coalition that spanned multiple star systems. Sir, Intelligence Officer Kexvara announced with obvious distress, human forces have made contact with the ancient archives. They're accessing historical records that predate Imperial civilization. The revelation sent shock waves through the War Council. The ancient archives contain knowledge from extinct civilizations that had achieved technological capabilities beyond current Imperial understanding. If humans gained access to that information, they could develop weapons that made Imperial technology obsolete. They're not just fighting the Empire, Admiral Zorkon realized with growing dread. They're researching every species we've ever conquered, learning from historical failures, and developing strategies based on thousands of years of accumulated resistance experience. Human military planning had evolved beyond tactical adaptation to include strategic analysis of Imperial history. They studied every Imperial conquest, identified patterns in Imperial behavior, and developed countermeasures based on comprehensive understanding of Imperial methodology. The humans have learned our greatest weakness, Admiral Zorkon announced to the stunned War Council. We've grown complacent through centuries of easy victories. Our tactics haven't evolved because they never needed to. We're fighting a war using strategies developed for conquering primitive civilizations. The truth was undeniable. Imperial military doctrine hadn't changed significantly in millennia because overwhelming technological superiority had made innovation unnecessary. Humans forced adaptation by refusing to fight conventional battles. What do you recommend? Chancellor Morketh asked, his voice carrying undertones of defeat. Admiral Zorkon studied the strategic situation with painful clarity. The Empire faced a coalition of species led by humans who had proven capable of continuous innovation under pressure. Imperial forces were demoralized, Imperial technology was being turned against them, and Imperial subjects were rebelling throughout known space. Negotiation. Admiral Zorkon replied quietly. The humans have demonstrated that military victory against them is impossible. They adapt faster than we can respond, learn from every engagement, and inspire others to resist Imperial rule. The admission sparked outrage among War Council members who had never contemplated surrender. Yet intelligence reports confirmed Admiral Zorkon's assessment. Human capabilities continued expanding while Imperial strength diminished. Perhaps, Admiral Zorkon suggested carefully, the humans offer an alternative to perpetual warfare. Their proposed federation emphasizes cooperation rather than conquest. Other species support their vision because it offers freedom rather than subjugation. Supreme Chancellor Morketh studied the communication from General Chun. The human demands included provisions for peaceful coexistence, shared technology development, and democratic representation for all species. The proposal offered the Empire a transition from military dominance to cooperative leadership. They're not seeking to destroy us, Admiral Zorkon realized. They want to transform galactic civilization into something sustainable. The Empire's conquest-based expansion was ultimately self-limiting because it required perpetual warfare to maintain control. The War Council faced an unprecedented decision: accept human terms and abandon 3 millennia of Imperial dominance, or continue fighting a war they could not win against an enemy that grew stronger through resistance. Very well, Chancellor Morketh announced with weary resignation. Open negotiations with this human coalition. Discover what they truly offer as an alternative to Empire. As Admiral Zorkon prepared to communicate with Earth, he reflected on the trap that had ensnared galactic civilization. Humans hadn't simply defeated the Empire. They had demonstrated that conquest was ultimately inferior to cooperation as a basis for advanced civilization. The Empire had walked into Earth expecting easy victory, and, instead, discovered the future of galactic society. The primitives had taught the galaxy's most advanced civilization how to evolve beyond warfare into something unprecedented: genuine peace among the stars.